It's my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you to the New York Academy of Art. My name is Paul Provost, and I have the honor and the privilege of serving as the president of the Academy here. And we're thrilled to be hosting this event and this wonderful conversation with some distinguished guests honoring the legacy of the extraordinary Walter Robinson. And I'm going to save most of those remarks for the gang behind me, but I just want to say that he was an extraordinary individual who was a real champion and friend of the Academy. And so we're thrilled to have this event tonight, and they're also thrilled to be honoring his legacy at our great gala fundraiser, Take Home the Nude, which is taking place on December 15th up at Phillips on Park Avenue, followed by a very gala dinner at the Metropolitan Club. So I'm thrilled to have you here. I hope you'll join us as well for Take Home a Nude, because that will be an extraordinary and super fun evening. We've had such extraordinary outpouring of support for the gala, and there's some extraordinary works that are being offered for sale as part of this, the silent auction, as well as some great things in the live auction. So with that, I will turn things over to Carlo McCormick to say thank you very much, and we're excited to hear the panel and the conversation here about Walter. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, and just because I've always wanted to say that, I'd like to take this moment to thank the Academy.
Good one.
Pretty good. I worked on that. I don't have any more jokes, so enjoy that one. This is, really great to be able to talk about Walter and to be joined by some really remarkable people here. I don't really do very good introductions. I think you all should just really, if you don't know these people, you should just take out your cell phones and Google them, but I'll do my best. I'll start with Kate Shepard, which is great because didn't you get your master's here?
I got a certificate before it was accredited.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
When they were on Lafayette Street.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
With Stuart Pivar.
Yeah. They don't really like you saying his name around here anymore. I look
No.
like that. Yeah. No, sorry. Take that back. But you work with Galerie Lelong and
Right.
in Paris and New York, I assume, and
Right.
lots. A really good list of institutional collections you're in, kind of from AKG to Yale, alphabetically, with a lot in the middle. What else?
I'm so sorry you have to do this.
I know, it's just really terribly painful, but it is fun in a weird way. But I was going to talk about everyone's art, but that's like really weird, like in the third person to talk about them. So let me make this quicker now. Jane Dickson, next to you, the next in line. Jane actually appeared on this stage not so long ago with the inimitable Jerry Saltz, I believe, interviewed you. I'm sure that was quite an event. And you show with Karma, and what else do we want to say? Yes, she's like, for collections, you could say she's like got the New York trifecta, Manhattan of the Met and MoMA and Whitney, right? So, and other places. So. Just trying to blow smoke up all your asses. And now I have a little bit of sad news. Tom Otterness, who was going to join us, faced a kind of a person protesting outside for something he did over 50 years ago. And it really sucks because Walter loved Tom. As a matter of fact, Kate, you were telling me that you took screenshots of like Walter scolding somebody for like the same kind of thing to Tom. Tom was a really dear member of our community, but he felt uncomfortable, and he certainly didn't want to detract the attention from Walter. So we're very fortunate to have one of Walter's best and dearest friends, and all of ours, Robert Goldman, who we know as Bobby G. And that's enough. I'm tired of it. I always think that as a non-artist up here, representing all the writers and editors and critics and art workers around, I always think when when artists get together, you can almost smell the turpentine in the room when you start talking about art and stuff. And so I guess if that's a question, I'd like to ask each of you to share maybe some of the things you've talked about, because Walter was a great gossip and, you know, whatever. There's a lot of, everyone will have funny stories, but if you can remember actually talking about art with Walter and the kind of things you guys shared, you want to start?
Well, I just was always impressed by Walter's first take on artwork that was sort of critical or breaking it down, and then what he did was, rather than landing on criticism, he'd go back and look again and dissect it, because it's like the hamburger thing, the cheeseburger thing, you know, like, we're all cheeseburgers and we're all individual and all cheeseburgers are the same. So he was celebrating the uniqueness and contextualized the uniqueness of each artist. I'd love to know if you can relate to that.
Totally. I guess what I think really stood out for me about Walter was that he was extremely curious. He never lost his curiosity. It's so tempting as you get older to be like, yeah, all that young stuff, yeah, we should stick with the issues we were worrying about in, you know, our youth. But he was really open and curious. He was open and curious with dealers and with other critics, as well as with artists. You know, as an artist, I somehow thought of dealers as the adversary, and he was like, no, they're people too, and they're, you know.
Right.
I mean, I must say, I read the auction things today and thought, I wonder what Walter thinks about this.
Right.
You know, he's the one who started saying, Jane, you have something coming up in an auction. I was like, I don't, you know, that's scary. I can't think about that. And so he would just alert me every time something was coming up. And in bad times when my work was going really cheap, I bought some of it back myself. And it was, you know, I thought that's better than having it
Definitely.
not sell. So the fact that he wore many hats, and I mean, you could call it gossip, but it was, I like to believe that art is a conversation, and many people get stuck in treating it as a monologue. I'm going to talk about me, and that's all I'm interested in. And the fact that he was really open and interested in many people, and it didn't have to be people that were like him. He wanted to know what you thought, and like you were just saying, and then he'd think about it and then share it with other people.
Right.
Oh, Kate said this, and it was really profound. So that he was one of the connectors and really, I feel like, moved the conversation of contemporary art in New York forward repeatedly, as you were also doing as a critic, but he was sort of on both sides of the fence, because he was an artist and a critic.
And I think he would have probably been deeply uncomfortable about the idea that we're all talking about him, because
Right.
he would have way more questions for you about your work, each of you.
Yeah.
That was his engagement. He, you know, you might get the same old out of him, but basically he was going to engage you in questions to figure out what was going on.
He would leave the room if he was here. No, I mean, there was something where he was getting honored or something a couple years ago, and he asked me to be on the panel, and then he left the room. He couldn't bear to hear people talk about him.
I love it. In that spirit, Bobby, what should we say about him?
Well, what I have to contribute really is my observation about Walter's painting. And Because we've known each other since the time he began painting. And at the beginning, he had a couple of mentors. The first one was Christoph Kohlhofer. And Christoph taught him how to make these stencil paintings. And he made these incredible spray stencil paintings with images of a guy with a broken bottle and sort of a blonde Marilyn Monroe type image and a soldier, or the three I recall. And then after that, he told me that he wanted to learn to paint like pulp fiction cover illustrators. And his technique was from copying and learning what these illustrators had done. And then he started painting images from those pulp fiction covers, the romance paintings. And it's hard to really pigeonhole Walter because he's sort of a pictures generation person who painted, but then he was a conceptual painter. He had in his painting, he had a restless mind. So I don't know what year it was, 81, 2 maybe. He had a show at Metro Pictures when they were on Mercer Street. It was a very small space of the romance paintings, and it was a huge success. Nearly sold out, and he really established Walter as a painter. So then when it came around to have the next show, he completely undercut what it was that he was doing. He did these very kitschy paintings of cats and stuffed animals, and I didn't understand it. I thought
huge when when Metro moved to this really big space, so it wasn't like something, it was really in your face. It would be like an 8-foot tall kitten, and he would call it like Pussy 1, Pussy 2. I mean, everything about it was just like really difficult for the kind of domestic consumption of these things, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I didn't understand the kitsch at that time, but then, Jeff Koons came around, and I really understood, what was going on in Walter's restless mind, rather than just, produce these romance paintings that everybody liked. He was moving on. There's a film that Paul Schenkel, or a documentary video that Paul Schenkel did, and in it, Walter's very clear about what it is that he was doing. He says something like, well, I want to paint a motif, an image that is something that people desire.
That's right.
They love love, they love cats, they
And
love stuffed
hamburgers.
animals,
They love food.
Yeah.
they love hamburgers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, desire was a kind of a common thread, and I thought it was, he did a portrait of my wife, Tessa, who's here, and shortly after he gave it to her, he told me, like, just because he's kind of a little perverse that way, he's going like, for me to paint something, I have to kind of fall in love with it a bit. Going like, not that it, because she's your wife, I didn't really, but I had to like desire her to be able to paint her, and it was like
great.
great.
Could I say something about that? He did paint some of the most significant portrait paintings of the 1980s. A couple of them of you, Carlo, and also there's a great painting of Martin Wong. Once he mastered this sort of pulp fiction illustrator style of painting, he was off to the races with it, really. He could go in any direction, which is what he did.
And then I think the shirt paintings led to something else, which was like his wanting to make stripes and making geometry and getting really into it and using the shirt as an excuse. Like he said, he talked about a layer cake, and he said, oh, it's my excuse to make stripes, because everybody is, sort of like spent stripes.
Yeah.
It was his
Does
way of
everybody
doing
know what Kate is referring to, these folded up shirt paintings?
It was kind of his normcore thing. He really
Yeah.
he was really celebrating like everything that wasn't hip about America as the ultimate hipster, I think. But
Were they from LL Bean catalogs?
yeah, they were from like
They
really
were
like just the
Land's
worst kind
End.
of
Land's End.
mail
Yeah.
order culture.
Yeah.
But you're
Well,
right about and I'm curious because you work right there, Kate, right between kind of figuration and abstraction.
I'm not a figurative painter anymore, but
Okay.
that's how I
So
trained for
you
years.
you are fully abstract. And Walter, like, he also did a body of work that was not well received at the time, and now historically looks really good because he beat other people to it, who shall remain nameless. But he did these big spin art paintings. And so I think Walter was always interested in some of when he would do these salads, and I couldn't tell. I smoke weed, so I don't always read things that well, but they seem totally abstract to me, you know. So I think that he loved paint, and he loved to push it around and kind of push it beyond pure representation, right?
I think those were seemingly the most abstract paintings that he made, but it was also a turn for him, I think, in trying to get healthier. So he was like, I
Trying to
could be
design a
wrong,
salad.
but
Spin paintings?
no, the salad paintings.
Trying to love salad.
Trying to love salad. So I'd send him pictures of our salad, and he'd, like, months later say, here it is. It's cute.
His mind was in advance of the zeitgeist of the art world. One time I went over to Clinton Street, speaking about abstractions. He had these small paintings of dots, different colors, you know, and I said to him something, oh, you got to be kidding me, you know. And then later, you know, Damien Hirst makes a whole body of work on a gigantic scale out of the exact same thing that Walter was doing in the late 80s. Nobody's seen these paintings, but this is his mind. His mind was really restless and really, as I said, in advance of the art world zeitgeist. He was really brilliant.
And it is remarkable because he had he had a very good attendance record, better than any of us. He really went to a lot of shows,
He did.
a lot of openings.
Everything.
And I always I see artists doing that, and I think it's really good. You kind of got to put yourself out there. You kind of got to know, for students here, you kind of got to know what's out there as well and meet people. But it's also like really hard on your work because it makes you feel that everything's done. There's no room for your own voice, and so that he
Right.
could keep on kind of uncovering novelty within this endless glut that we have.
He inspired me to see more and more and to show up more and more. There was something like very strongly community-oriented in him, which I admire tremendously.
Yeah, I met a lot of people since he died who told me, like, oh yeah, I would go to openings with Walter. I'd go around to galleries with him, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, and then he would disappear.
And then he'd probably never say goodbye in the middle of it. We have a nice thing here with Bobby and Jane, and that you were all like kind of original members of this group, which really inspired me when I was a kid. And they were called Collab. And then that's also No Rio, where Bobby was for many years. ABC No Rio was out of that. And Jane, you worked with Fashion Moda. And I mean, there were all these kind of, alternative, they were called alternative spaces, but there was these really alternative currents. And I think what was really interesting to me, especially by the time the real estate show and the Times Square show, these big things they put together, is that this was a politically engaged art, I thought, but without the orthodoxies of political art, which sometimes, nothing against any of those artists, but from my instincts, I felt kind of beaten over the head by the politics of it. And then, so it's more like a social politics. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on in those collab meetings, how these ideas were being engaged, why you guys took things I think that the left didn't necessarily take. You just observed what was wrong here instead of like going with Lucy Lepard to Nicaragua or something. Sorry.
She's not here.
I know she's not here. She's in New Mexico. She'll forgive me. But can we talk about the fact that this work could be painterly and kind of part of popular culture, but political?
I was thinking today about how, in a way, there was a utopian impulse to collab, and I think it was very much shaped that Walter was a key member of it, which he would always deflect if you ever tried to thank him for anything, or acknowledge him for it. But he was a key influencer in that he had already been to graduate school and didn't he go to the
Philosophy at
You went
Columbia.
to Columbia, right? And
Yes, and then with Edit they went to
Did you do Independence? Who did
No.
the Whitney program with him up here? No one?
Charlie did.
Charlie did. Yeah.
A lot of collab people did, but it was a sort of utopian urge. Our generation had come out of the hippie time, and Walter really wanted to continue sharing, and this was a place where we would get little grants. So there was a little bit of money, just enough that people would come to the meetings to argue over how to spend the money. And then we would fight over, one person would say, let's do a magazine. Somebody else would go, yeah, we should get a fax machine, we should get video equipment, we should do an art show, we should do
And then
print.
didn't he rent a house on the North Fork for
Yes.
all his friends?
Yes, which was hilarious. Did you go to that summer? Yeah. And then we fought over who got which bedroom. It was like there was no organizing principle. No one said, oh, there's 6 bedrooms, so you can come. No, people just showed up when they wanted and went, well, I want that bedroom. And you go, well, I'm already in it. You're going to sleep in the... So, it was... I think he and Sophie Vieux du Temple were the ones who... He wrote a grant to New York State Council on the Arts and said we needed a house in the North Fork so that we could, think about art, and we were going to do this mural. So we put up a big piece of canvas in the garage, and every now and then someone would slap something on the canvas. It was a terrible mural,
Wow.
which we then showed in Chicago the next year. But I think that the reason that collab is known historically, unlike a million other artist collectives that might have had also wonderful artists, was because of Walter. Walter knew everybody. He was already working at Art in America, so he brought Jeffrey Deitch to the Times Square show, and he brought all these dealers that he knew.
I think he got, someone did, I think Jeffrey put the deposit down on the building for the Times Square show, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought Mimi was...
It was Mimi Gross got the building, and I think
Yeah.
Jeffrey put up the check.
Mary Boone showed up
There we go.
to scope it out.
Yeah, everybody came to scope it out. And then I feel like Walter sort of looked at himself as a spy into the financial, into the commercial
Absolutely.
part of the art world. And then he loved to just give you a tip. It was like a stock tip, only it was an art tip. And he would do it in this really casual way and then refuse to take credit for it.
You mean like you should buy something?
Well, my first example is when we were trying to raise money for the Times Square show, and I don't know anything about the deposit, and maybe John, who's here, would know who did the deposit. But Walter one day goes, Jane, you're coming with me to the Public Art Fund. And I was like, what's the Public Art Fund? I didn't know anything. So we went and talked to them and said, hey, we're doing this art show. Don't you want to give us money? It's in 3 weeks. They went, our budget doesn't
Oh,
work
I
that
see.
way. We could talk about next year. But then I casually mentioned, oh, well, I'm going to do an ad on this computer billboard that was my day job. And they were like, oh, computer billboard, let's talk more about that. We'd like to, if you can get us access, we'd like to do an artist series. After in the Times Square show, I met Keith Haring. I already knew Jenny Holzer. And then I went back to the Public Art Fund and I said, I'm happy to convince my boss to let us do this if I get to pick the artists for the first year. because it was part of the, continuing the collab zeitgeist. And I said, I know some really great artists that you don't know yet, so you have to let me curate
Awesome.
my cut. I don't want to get paid, but I want to pick the artists for the first season, and they will be Keith Haring and Jenny Holzer and David Hammonds. I also picked Barbara Kruger. So it was a great,
That's great.
blockbuster. But Walter would never, he would never take any credit for having
that,
it.
right.
And then I just did a thing with at JFK Airport with Public Art Fund now, like 40 years later. But he would do things like that, like, he'd mention an artist that he knew to some gallery, and he just had this very understated way.
Yeah, to be generous.
And it was because he was good at listening to people.
But
So many. I'm sure everyone who's here, most of you knew Walter, and all will also have.
I think
stories of
everybody felt
generosity.
like he made them feel like they were his best friend.
Yeah.
But in terms of his relationship to like the power structures of the art world, he was a bit subversive as well. I would always, because I was out with him a lot, and a very important dealer type would be there, and he would ask the most embarrassing question about
That's right.
didn't that work flop at auction, and didn't you like? And I heard that like maybe there's a problem with one of your girlfriends on the side. I mean, he would just say these things to people, and they would be totally flummoxed, and he'd do it with a kind of
A twinkle in his eye.
a twinkle in his eye, but like seeming all very innocent about it. But it was kind of ruthless also. So he helped a lot of people, but part of that help was also to kind of people who didn't need the help to maybe tamp them down at
Well,
times.
he always put prices in his Instagram
yeah,
reviews.
all these things which are supposed to
And
the
he-
opaque aspects he made really
Right.
evident. Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote about my show last December, and he put the prices in. I just had to let that fly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
He was a contrarian. He knew what you were supposed to do, and he wasn't going to do that. I mean, I feel like that's why he did the spin paintings when the earlier paintings were so popular. He was like, well, then I'll do the opposite of what people want me to do.
I think a lot of what he did was also kind of challenge or undermine this notion of the auteur, of authorship. So the spin paintings did that, because just at the moment when everyone's going like, wow, like, we're not supposed to like this kind of painting anymore. We're way too smart for it, but it's seducing the hell out of us. The guy can really paint. He starts doing the spin paintings. And then all the appropriation, which of course was very much in the air of the pictures generation, and a lot of the way that postmodernism was infiltrating. But then at the end, and a lot of people probably still have problems with some of that work, he was doing AI paintings where he, kind of giving cues to AI to create an image, and then maybe at times even outsourcing the painting to somebody in Asia. So really like doing that, which I thought was kind of lovely, because then it was really like kind of conceptual art. It's sort of the way that I think if you apply to this school or many others, that you're given prompts, to kind of, let's see what you got, how you think about this. So his work stayed that way? I mean,
He tried to describe my work to AI and to make my work with it, and it didn't work, but I thought his attempts were really,
amazing.
I was flattered that he would want to do that. I think it's called, somebody must know, it's like called mid-century or mid-journey, right? That's what he used. It was a toy. It was a great, and the last paintings of his life were generated by those ideas, like the old man painter, which I thought those paintings were really brilliant, and the cat coming out of the canvas.
Yeah, they're funny. I don't know. I didn't oversee that's a spin painting there. There is like these images for those who kind of get bored at looking at us. There's a full cornucopia of Walter's madness there.
Do you think that we could call Walter a conceptual painter?
Yeah, I think that fits. Does that work for you guys? I like that. I'm not good for labels, but definitely he kept a lot of conceptual tropes in there. He was really smart. I mean, I think that I like to make jokes about how painters aren't necessarily the sharpest tacks in the box, but Walter was like quite brilliant, and he did bring that to it.
He did the spin paintings at 131 Norfolk in a storefront studio where he had this gigantic contraption where kind of a wooden platform where he would mount a blank canvas and a motor under it that spun around, and then he would throw all this enamel paint on it while it was spinning.
Yeah, he said he would throw the enamel paint, hold his breath, and then run out of the room.
Yeah, but it was this big machine, actually, that painted the paintings.
Yeah, some of them were really large scale.
He and Beebe constructed.
Oh, and he wanted to go back, he told me about 6 years ago. He wanted to do them again, but never got his act together. But he was asking me about enamel paint and about surfaces.
Jane was built again in the studio when I opened the door. It was a new machine, but I don't think you like it. It was very fancy.
Oh, it wasn't the old like
The
jerry-rigged
funky one.
wooden thing from 131 Norfolk.
Yeah. The scrap worked really well, but this one, Uli and I assembled it, and it was very modern and very fancy. And all the paint was lined up, the new cans.
Amazing. Back into production. He told me he really just, I think it was really great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the artist critic thing, because that's really one of the weirdest hyphenates out there, and it rarely serves either the critic or the artist but to be both. It's kind of tough. I mean, ask Tom Lawson or anyone else whose career is washed up in academia that way. How did you think he negotiated this weird thing of anyway? All to say that he did quit writing pretty much at the end, so he could be a full-time painter, and I think his work really benefited from those last 10 years when he really wasn't writing much. But how did you see him negotiate it? I always thought it tormented him a little bit.
You mean in the old days or
Yeah,
in the Instagram days?
Yeah, being
because
the critic and the artist kind of thing.
Because the Instagram stuff was really serious and really successful and very thoughtful. So I feel like he brought it back into a very bite-sized manner.
Okay, yeah. I don't do social media. I missed it.
Oh, important. Yeah.
I always felt like I could hear him composing the review of the work as he was making it, and that was, a double-edged sword, because it made him very self-conscious, and it also, as the contrarian that he was, he would have this impulse to do the romantic, for example, that period, but then he's thinking of the criticism it's going to get as he's making it, and then as the contrarian that he was, he's like, well, people are going to, it could be seen this way positively, but it could also be seen negatively, and now I'm going to have to make other work that's going to examine it from the other side. And I felt like that's somehow why his work kept shifting, but also that he kept up his critics that go to 1 million shows, and he kept up that pace even when he was no longer employed as a critic. He went to 1 million things, and then he wrote about them on social media, shared them with all his friends and fans, to continue, because that had become an integral part of who he was.
I think he had like 17,000 followers, did he? 25,000 followers. He was brilliant on Instagram. It's like
And-
you had
and
to stop
kind of funny,
everything you
right?
were
A great
doing
explainer and funny.
read it. What?
I've always thought he was a great explainer and also inherently funny, which is oddly things that doesn't really come naturally to art
Right.
criticism.
Right.
And Instagram lends itself to these short quips, which he was good at. You know, you just a really quick thing and then leave you to go, whoa.
But there was some very serious thinking in these Instagram
Yeah.
posts, and he was reading a lot of art criticism or post-structuralist theory that in his studio. So these Instagram posts, one thing he did tell me was that he felt obligated to write something serious so he could continue going to museum press previews. But the writing on Instagram is really noteworthy.
Yeah.
But you know, of all the different kind of frisson within him and his work, he's got all this openness and this generosity, but then he's got this weird streak of sarcasm, which is
Right.
always like, I would see him compliment people and they would get mad because he just had a way of like saying something nice. The way he said something nice sounded like he was taking the piss out of them, and it was like,
Wow.
it was just his tone of voice, but that carried in a bit, and I think about that as with his own work, like with something like something really romantic or really seductive, all these kind of beauty, all these, you know, the male gaze, all these things that are problematic in 21st century art, we could say. He did everything kind of knowing better, and I love that sense of like, I know better than to fall in love, but I can't help but fall in love, and I think that's where his work really worked well.
But also, I want to say that he was really sort of anti-hierarchical, so that like the people that he would say sarcastic things were all people that were full of themselves and very successful. And he was extremely kind to people who weren't that successful. He really went out of his way frequently to
Champion.
He really identified with the struggle, and almost every nincompoop who was trying, he'd be like, yeah, there's something there, he would never say a snarky, sarcastic thing to somebody who really didn't have much going on.
Well, the way he explained that to me was that as an artist, it did not behoove him to help really good artists, that he should help all the others because that makes him look better or something like that. Like, I don't want real competition. I'll just really help the less good artists, which
That's why he helped me.
No, that's his sense of humor, though. I mean,
But Carlo, why don't you describe when you first started collaborating on your writing with Walter?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was fun. I had a collaborative spirit. I think Walter did too. We have a filmmaker, videographer in the room who did a video with Walter. The moment the suicide, Alan Vega. I think Walter collaborated a fair amount. As an editor, he always was kind of bringing people in all the way, even through his years at ArtNet. We were just, incredibly immature and just, out at it for laughs, I think, with a kind of irreverence. So we didn't really bring out the best in each other, but we sure had a good time doing it. But I think he had a kind of, with Edit doing art right, I think collab was, it stands for collaborative projects. I think collaboration was somehow in his DNA. I think y'all did that a bit.
How did the Art in America piece, Slouching Toward Avenue D, come to be?
Well, I spilled out a lot of information, but I was not a very good writer then, and I certainly didn't have that really, that art in America tone. That kind of, I worked better with doubt than with authority. So really, Walter did most of the work on that, I would say. And then there's other things, wouldn't compare us to Lennon and McCartney, but we did have a way of co-signing things together, which someone else did like more work on. He was kind enough. I wrote a thing which a lot of people got pretty mad at me for at the time, in the kind of the local organ for the kind of scene we were part of. It was called the East Village Eye. And I wrote this thing called East Village R.I.P., and we basically said the scene was over. And it was kind of like, maybe we could smell it was kind of, on its way down, because scenes have a natural evolution life form. And if you see enough of them, you kind of realize how short-lived and miraculous and wonderful they are. So we kind of declared it dead with all the arrogance of saying, since we invented it, we're the ones to say it's dead. And it was really just me being really cranky, and Walter thought it was good enough that he put his name to it, but he really just did it to take some of the flack away from me. So how are we doing for time? I'm in this room with all these people who like knew and loved Walter, so I think it would be nice if anyone has kind of questions, or we don't need to overly share, but maybe some stuff.
Is there another microphone so we can hear what people say?
Oh yeah, Gracie's. About what? Art Beat. That was really, a gallery beat. That was really where Walter was, I think, really taking the piss out of the art world proper. Him and Paul H.O. would go
into Gramercy,
into the sanctum sanctorum of like these blue chip galleries, and like really, with no tact or grace. I hated that show. How did you guys think? It was Paul, but Walter was the ultimate enabler, and Kathy,
and he did that TV show with.
That's what we're talking about.
With Kostabi.
Oh right, well that was he was on it.
Other.
Lots of people were on it. Yeah, he championed Mark just because everyone hated him. That was Walter's sensibility for sure. But we had a great time I did that Kostabi show. This is this guy Mark Kostabi, who was kind of, I think most of you would know him, but he's fallen a little bit out of public consciousness of late. But he was a bit of a provocateur, and he'd have this game show where he would get these kind of celebrity contestants, and often they were like weird art writers like me or Walter or Glenn O'Brien or Gary Indiana or whatever. He'd get these people up there, and then so we'd fight, because there'd be money involved, and some of us, like Glenn's, is like, who didn't need the money, was just so competitive. If he didn't win every title, he'd start pouting. But Name That Painting, is that what it's called? Yeah, and then the best thing about it, though, because Walter was so good, not Walter, but Mark in this case was so good at like turning, there would be an audience filled with artists who probably were, quite desperate to get written up by one of us, and they would have these paddles, and one would be a plunger, and one would be a cash register. So whoever got the, anyway, sorry, that was his weird anecdote. But Walter did love that. He was a big participant in it. Anyone else? Sorry. Go ahead. Is that Mike?
It's great hearing these stories because you guys got to hang out with him a lot. But I found him so difficult, and a lot of other people did, because you didn't know which Walter you would get. Like, you might get the friendly Walter, and he would compliment you, or you could get a really snarky Walter, and he would like lay you low. And it's like, what the hell, But then he gave platform to Charlie Finch, which is really like, Charlie could be super problematic. Like, he gave, as nice as Walter was and seemingly encouraging, and I love his paintings. I love the whole thing. He's fascinating. And he was like a gravity in the New York art world that left. You kind of really, you'd go out to an art show, and if you ran into Walter, you'd hope you did, because you could ask him what he thought, or he'd ask you what you thought of the show. When he left, it was like, I know a lot of people didn't know how to, like, what are we going to do now, you know? But the fact that he would give a platform to Charlie, you know.
That is a that's a tough nut. Charlie Finch, for those who don't know, he passed away, but he did not lack an opinion, and he was a real loose cannon, and he said kind of really fucked up shit on a regular basis. But Walter loved that, and
Didn't Walter really admire how Charlie could just write out a review or a text really extemporaneously and?
There we go. I was wondering what he saw in him. Now I know. At least he made deadlines, which I never did. Walter, part of our relationship was that I was always like screwing up on his deadlines, but he was a forgiving man. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to make note of a couple other really brilliant series of paintings that Walter did. These still lifes he did on Clinton Street in the 80s of things like a jar of Vicks Vapor Rub or baby oil, cans of Budweiser. I think Katie Nolan took note of those. And
they were kind of product paintings, which befit the time, but he did them in a very handmade way.
They were
Connects to the normcore thing that happened later.
It's kind of,
with
I
the
think it feeds into
catalog
it, yeah.
stuff.
They were actually really brilliant. He was painting what it was that was in the medicine cabinet on Clinton Street, and the beer cans he was drinking.
He did have a love for the quotidian, and the beer paintings would be great because there'd be like 3 beers, and he'd call it a 6-pack, so that you'd be like, oh, I drank the other 3, you know. So.
I thought those paintings, that series came out of fatherhood for him, that it was like about domestic minutia,
Okay.
the dailiness of family life.
And he did one of the most, they were at this magazine I worked at called Paper. Walter became a columnist, and not about art. He wrote a column called A Dad's Life, which was just amazing. And like David, the publisher, would be getting calls from people going like, we want to option this. This is a great TV show. This is what, because he was so funny, and it was just like all those ways that, those kind of things that choke you up in the end, to just the cute things that his daughter did. And he was a single dad at that time because the mother had passed away. And it was really great, and he only really stopped because as his daughter Antonia was growing up and going to school and stuff, like all of a sudden, like kids would be like, oh yeah, my parents love reading about you every month or something like that. So it was like he kind of had to stop, but it was really amazing.
Do you think those are accessible?
I guess they are. We'll have to talk to the estate, but I'm sure Lisa could do a reissue on that. You'd have to talk to Antonia. Maybe it'd be good. She'd be all right with it now. But they were really brilliant and timeless, because the art world, it's sort of like, if you really want to feel good about the moment, just look at a 10-year-old art magazine and you realize how irrelevant it is now. So his work was timeless in a way that art rarely is. Sorry, I'm just being really cynical.
There was somebody in the back that had. Oh, Becky.
Becky.
Oh, was there someone else?
This one first, or?
Hi. I'm remembering a few things about Walter, but he was one of the ringleaders of the A. Moore store. After the gift shop at the Times Square show, he lobbied with Collab to do that first A. Moore store on Broome Street or Watt Street. That's where he did those spray paintings, spray stencils. And also, he did beautiful paintings of Antonia when she was a kid, a baby. He fell in love with Antonia. Really. And I ran into him, I can remember one specific afternoon running into him at Chelsea. And we just went to he followed me. He'd seen my signing in at Martha Rossler. It was just all on one block, and he caught up with me. And we saw a few more shows. I dragged him in to see Giannis Kounelis. He wasn't going to go see it. And I just loved the show that was at Gladstone. And by the time I'd gotten home, he'd written this exquisite Instagram post that got everything in there. Fantastic. You know, it was like these haikus. I agree with Kate. He did fantastic things on Instagram with prices. Nobody else is doing that. It was really an education for me to see it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, because I don't, as an artist, I never, it's very hard for me to go into a gallery and say, well, what's the price range? I force myself to sometimes, but, you know, it's kind of still a secret world. But I knew him, I met him on Worcester Street.
When he was living with Edith?
Yes, and Izar Patkin was there. And he was such a bristly, funny guy. He just had this very inquiring way, like, who are you? What are you doing here? What do you do? You know, and that didn't change, but he was a big softy. He was a big cream puff, too. So, you know, he wrote about Charlie Finch. He defenestrated.
Yes.
Yeah, he committed suicide by jumping out of the window. He was really sick. But, like, what a word. I'd never read that word before.
Defenestrate.
Defenestrated. So anyways, I just miss Walter all the time. I went in my storage room. I have two little paintings of Antonia's. I have one called Dan. It was a painting of a clown toy that Antonia named Dan after Dan Asher. And he's written his name on the back.
You sure Walter didn't have a hand in that?
And the other one, I mean, I have these paintings because you, Carlo, insisted upon me getting them when he was having like a garage sale. Gracie was there, and the other one's Raggedy Ann. I mean, they're just beautiful, beautiful little paintings. And I just miss him so much. You know, he was a presence in my life since 1978. There's nobody like him. So I don't know where you got all these photos. I never saw that one of him in orange. But anyways, thank you so much for this evening.
Oh, thank you, Becky. I also love the way you kind of describe the brevity by which he could actually just, you know, get to, you know, I'm a bit of a florid writer with lots of tangents, so he was a very good editor for me, but Walter was really good. Betsy, is it too much to ask you to talk a little bit about what it was like to edit Walter? Because you're the one who did that, or if you don't want to say anything, you don't have to. Don't want to put you on the spot. He didn't. He came in. He came in like Charlie Finch, just to the word. No, that's enough. All right, thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm kind of curious because he was a really good editor. He did it in a way that was so unobtrusive that you kind of just thought you were that smart to begin with.
Oh.
It's like, oh yeah, I'm so good with words sometimes, but.
He hated boring writing so much.
Yes.
He's like, read me the beginning of that, and then if you read it and he wasn't interested, then he didn't want to hear anymore. And I thought that was his gift in writing, that he really grabbed you from the start.
I think there was a sense of writers in that time. We've mentioned Edit. There was just so many wild writers, and in some ways they were crazier than some of the artists. But I think what was passed on was a sense of style, and I always felt like, yeah, academics do fine. They're really rigorous, and we benefit from their scholarship but they're boring as hell. And that the writers who were kind of coming out of this contemporary art scene at that time had to kind of match the style and attitude of the art, and it made the writing, if uneven, certainly more entertaining and engaging. Do we have time for a little bit more? How are we doing? How about back there? Yeah? You go ahead. Oh, okay. Good to see you.
Hey guys. I feel like you guys have all talked about this and everyone would recognize it, but something that Walter really did have was a kind of passionate intellectual curiosity and enthusiasm that I think when you're looking at art, like all young artists have that, and then the longer you're in the art world and you're looking at art, it gets kind of battered down and diminished. And Walter, we spent a lot of time looking at shows together, and I was always really amazed at how kind of open and innocent his like curiosity and passion for art remained. And it was like such a high level for somebody who'd been living in, looking at, making, just being like a fiber in the art world. And yet he still, all the way to the end, was just like, what makes art great? And he wanted to know, and he didn't have the answer for it. Or he loved going to look at art because he sort of was prompted to ask himself what made art great. And it was really, I don't know, this was just very, the older I got, the more struck I was by how that passion stayed like so fresh in him.
And he used to talk about the avant-garde. He was really enchanted by that concept. And so sometimes when he didn't understand work, he'd say like, well, I guess it's the avant-garde. Do you remember that, Chris?
Totally. And he also did it with a very wry sense of humor. I mean, he had a perverse sense of humor, but then this super innocent curiosity and enthusiasm. And it was a very nice combination, a very unique combination, I think.
Yeah, I think we should all remember that for when we're feeling like we've seen it all and get a little jaded. Walter was really, to stay that fresh is great. Were you going to say something, Gracie?
Yeah, one of the things that Walter's credited with is the term zombie abstraction.
Right.
I mean, do you know
zombie formalism, you mean?
Zombie formalism.
Yeah.
Was that in an article? How did that happen, or what was that all about?
He nailed it, and I think it's really interesting. It was a kind of observation that Walter could make but didn't always put into print, and I think a lot of careers got kind of destroyed by that, because it was this thing, and it was so seductive, but ultimately it was kind of easy. Everything looked really smart, and it had a really interesting process, but it was ultimately empty, and it was amazing that he could call that out in the way he did. I don't know, what did you think about you guys?
I don't think he realized that it had legs like that.
Yeah.
But the legs were probably pretty destructive, like you said, but I thought it was like calling a spade in a very smart way.
Yeah, I can thank him for it because one of my favorite restaurants was opened by someone's reopened food, and that guy was one of the guys who got kind of buried by the emperor's new clothes, as Walter described them. But.
I asked him about that, how he came up with that, and he said that when he first said it, it wasn't a pejorative. Like he didn't know it was going to end up being taken that way. It was more, and it was like specifically one painter, he sort of thought it was. Did he ever explain that to you?
No, I never. I think we just laughed about it. But yeah, actually, if you read what he wrote, it's not a huge takedown. It's just one of those kind of observations, like the kid at the fashion show who points out that the emperor has no clothes. It was really like this kind of wonderment at like how we were all like following this train that was really going nowhere. But it wasn't particularly vicious. We good then?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This was. Thank you, guys. Thank you, buddy. Thank you.